In this video, I'm going to pull together all of the skills that I've shown throughout this series and turn this skew-friendly table leg. I hope you enjoy the video. On the lathe, I've got a piece of planed 2x2 softwood. This is redwood, so try and avoid whitewood. It's not as good quality. Redwood is really what you want. So plain 2x2 comes out about 45mm square. This is just from a local DIY superstore. So I wanted to try and make this project as accessible as possible. So 2x2, 12 inches, 300 long. So nice, simple thing. And this is the leg that we're going to make during this video. So I've just sort of put together a few shapes that make up an attractive leg, but they're all very skew-friendly shapes. And it's going to cover all of the techniques that I've shown over the last few videos. So we've got a pommel, we've got beads, we've got planing cuts, we've got flowing curves with planing cuts. There's going to be peeling cuts, sizing cuts, all of those things. So I wanted to make it so that you could do it just with a single tool. So I'm going to be using my signature beading and parting tool, obviously, but you're welcome to use whatever skew you want to. I will be using my calipers as well. So yes, that is a tool, but when I say one tool, I mean the turning tool. I know what some people are like. So I've also made a storyboard. Now, if you like access to this, if you'd like to have a go at this, just drop me a comment below and I'll make sure I put it on my website so you can download it. But there's no point me doing it if no one's interested. So please do put a comment below if you want me to make this accessible. So this is just on a piece of offcut of timber, and you can see I've drawn out half of the shape of the leg on there. So hopefully that will make sense to what you can see. There's no point in drawing the whole thing. Half the leg is plenty. And I've got all the measurements and details that I need on there to make it repeatable. The other important thing about a storyboard is that if you look on the edge there, you can see I've put some little notches in. That allows me to rest my pencil in the same place every time. So it makes it repeatable, because one of the main things about making multiples is getting the details in the same place along the leg. So the storyboard allows that. So it makes that possible and makes that easier. So I'm going to keep that. I tend to keep those on the banjo, so it's right in front of me and easy access, so I can bring it into play. I've marked the shoulder on there. It's about 10mm wide, so we'll do a square cut initially and then put a curve. And in the first part of this video, I'm just going to do this as a complete demo, just with a single tool. And then later, I'm going to set up my duplicating fingers, talk to you about those and how I use those. And I'm going to make another one of these kind of in production mode at production speed. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. But for this part of the video, I'm just going to work through this leg as a demo, and I'll explain what I'm doing as I'm doing it. So I'm running the lathe just shy of 2000 RPM, and the initial cut, just like in the previous video, is to separate the bit we're going to turn from the bit that we want to keep. So that first cut is into the waist, and I'm just going to work back to that first line. And I'm going to create a square shoulder, so that's really important that we get the bevel in line with the cut so that I get a square shoulder. Then I can turn this. Once I've got that separation, I can turn this away, and normally I would use a roughing gouge for this, but you absolutely can do it with a skew. The only trouble using a skew, you do tend to get these bigger chunks thrown back at you. A roughing gouge will tend to give you much smaller chips. And I do find a roughing gouge more efficient in actual fact. A little bit more off there. There we go. And then back. But it absolutely is possible to use a skew to do this. Check when it's round. You can feel, if you're not sure how round it is, I'd use a trailing thumb or finger, but once it's nearly round, you absolutely can touch it at the back there, just lightly. So a nice planing cut. There's nice ribbons coming off this time. There we go, that's nice. Storyboard comes into play, and this storyboard is designed to sit against that square shoulder. So as long as that square shoulder is cut in the right place, we're all good. And it lines up with the end there, so we know that's right. And I'm just going to put lines in each of those positions. There we go, so it's clear what's going to happen. So the next stage is what I call blocking out. So I'm going to bring in my calipers, and again, still using my signature tool, and I'm going to work along and take a series of dimensions. So the first one is going to be this smaller bead, which is 35mm. I'm just going to put a little incision either side of it, and that prevents some of the sort of splaying out of the fibres that you can get. So you get a clean entry point. Go in with two hands, and then the calipers just rest on the back. Really light fingertip stuff, and as soon as they're at the right size, it drops through. So this first bead is full size. This section here, the top of the swell, is full size. Then we get down to the bottom here, and we need 30mm. So again, I'm just going to do a little incision which just severs the fibres and allows you to get in. So start with two hands. The calipers just rest on the back. I'm not forcing them, not pressing too hard. 38 is the next one. And the last one is 40. There we go, playing that away. I say that's the last one, there's one more. I've got to do the very foot of the leg as well, that's 22mm. So that's here. This, we don't need the full width of the tool here, just maybe a third of the tool width is fine. Just drops through, there we go, get rid of that fuzzy bit. So I'll stop the lathe and just show you where we're up to, so hopefully you can understand the process. So this is the blocking out stage, and you can see that the details are all set out now. So the diameters, but also the positions of those details are now fixed. So what I'd suggest, if you're not used to doing this kind of work, this kind of copy work where you're making multiples of the same thing, if you get your whole set of legs or lamps or whatever it is you're making, turn them all to this stage. Hopefully you'll agree, I haven't done anything difficult yet. I've only gone in with peeling cuts with my parting tool and my calipers and just done sizing cuts. If you can make your set of 4 or however many it is, and they all match at this stage, there's going to be a very high chance they still match, or at least fairly closely match, once you've done the shaping. It means that things are going to be in the right place. So you can see this is going to be a bead, there's another bead there. That line is the high spot, so that's this round over part here. We've got this sweeping curve down to this fillet and bead. And then we've got this tulip foot down here, which is on this part down here. And we've got the diameters set all the way through there. So once you've done this blocking out stage, we can start putting some shape into it. And what I tend to do is start down the bottom and just kind of work along really. So fire the lathe back up again. Initially, I'm going to put some incisions in, some V-cuts. So little V-cut here for this, the side of this bead and the top of this tulip. And that's going to give me space to actually turn into. Without the V-cuts, it's very difficult to turn a bead or turn that shape and get it right the way around. With the V-cut, it gives me space to work. So I can now roll that round. So I'm using the tip of the tool, you can see, not rushing, nice and steady, round into that corner. Then this bead is the same. So we're going to pick that up. There, and the other way. All the time cutting on the tip of the tool. A little bit wonky, we'll do that one more time. Good. Yeah, happy with that. Good, so then we can turn this tulip. Now this tulip is probably, we've not really done this shape as such, but it begins with a taper. And then the taper becomes a kind of hollow sweep. And we did practice that. The second part of the planing video, I gave you a little exercise to practice, and we created a sweeping curve. So that's really what we're doing here. It's just a little bit more pronounced. So as I'm cutting through that, it's a planing cut, we're still planing on the lower part of the tool, but as I'm cutting through that, the tool handle lifts, and I'm gonna just sort of, if this was a gouge, you'd say I'm opening the flute. So the bevel just becomes a bit more open. So I'm gonna roll the tool slightly as I work, and that's gonna create this really lovely shape down to that measured step down there. I really like this shape. This is one of my favourite shapes to turn. It's really satisfying, really nice shape. And then just on the bottom corner, I'm going to put a little chamfer. I don't need to slice that. I can just touch that on the lower corner. As long as the bevel's rubbing, I can get a little cut on there, and that just breaks the bottom corner. What you can find is with a stool or a table, if it gets dragged across a hard surface, you can find that it can damage the fibres or the grain on the corner. So by just breaking that corner, it gives the item a little bit more protection. So we can move along to here now, and again, V-cuts to give myself space. If it's helpful, you can put a line down the centre of your beads. I tend not to do that so much these days. I've developed quite a good eye for the shapes, but if it's helpful, absolutely do that, no problem at all. So you can see there, I've just taken the corners off with those V-cuts. Likewise here on this top corner, there, and then same on this little bead as well. There, and there. So that's kind of roughed it out, so then I can do the shapes. To give myself space to turn this bead, I can shape this, the pommel. If it was going to be a square pommel, I've just got to do it, but because it's a shaped pommel, I can remove that wood. It makes this bead a little bit easier. So this is a slicing cut using the tip of the tool. The handle is low. I'm lifting it in. You never just poke and push into the wood. It goes right into that corner, and now I'm free to turn this bead. I've got the space to do it. There we go, and then the other way. Notice I just adjust my grip on my handle just to allow me to get around these beads easily. Just lost that cut, so we do that one more time. And then just balance it out a little bit on the other side. One more cut the other side. There we go, that's better. Likewise on this one, we may as well turn the two higher details first. That then gives space for the lower bead. Around there, and then the small bead. Again with the tip of the tool, really taking my time. There's really no rush. As you've got the tip of the tool engaged, you've got control over the cut, and there's no problem, really very little chance of a catch. Top of the fillet there, I'm just going to do that by eye. If you're not sure, if you're not comfortable doing it by eye, absolutely you can bring in the template again and mark that correctly. I'm fairly comfortable doing that by eye. So we're going to do planing cuts along here. So again, initially it's just a planing cut with a slight lift of the handle, and that produces the taper. But for the best results, the best looking leg, you don't really want straight lines. If you can make this a fluid curve, they will look a lot more elegant. Just engage the tip of the tool as I come up to this detail, this fillet at the end. And what that does, it just gives me the control, enables me to get into that detail nice and crisp and sharp. So I want a little bit more shaping into that. A little bit more there, that's nice. And you can see I'm getting really nice curly shavings coming off the tool. So a nice sharp tool will give you really good results even on pine. I've heard it said so many times that you need sharp tools for turning pine, and it's quite true, but you know what? You need sharp tools for turning any wood, so it's really important your tools are sharp. Now I've turned this bead at the top, this was a round, it's not quite the right shape, so I'm just going to go back and just adjust that slightly. That's better. Yeah, I'm happy with that. We're good to sand. So with sanding, best practice is to remove the tool rest, but as a production turner, the way that we tend to do this is to leave that in place, but I actually use the banjo and the tool rest to stabilize my front hand. So my hand is here, my other hand is at the back, and I'm going to sand at the back of the work. So there's never any chance of any wood, any abrasive or my fingers or anything like that getting caught between the work and the tool rest. So it's a very safe way of doing it, and you'll find all production turners will sand like this. But as I've said before, if you don't feel comfortable, simply don't do it. You remove the tool rest and just do it in your normal way. But this is the way that we do it as production turners, so I thought it'd be worth just showing you. You want a nice flexible abrasive that folds up and rolls up, and you can get it into the details that you've turned, get around those beads. And obviously we're always trying to turn the very best shape that you can, but if anybody tells you that they've never tweaked the shape of a bead with some sandpaper, they are lying to you. So you can sand this pommel a little bit, and on a smaller thing it's not too bad. You really just use the face of the abrasive and keep your fingers fairly clear. As this gets bigger, that gets harder to do, and I probably wouldn't really do it on a bigger thing. But on a small thing like this, absolutely no problem at all. I then go in, that's 180, and that's fine on pine. Generally pine is going to get painted, so 180 finish is absolutely fine. Beyond that, I will tend to use a red pad. Now, some of the old timers will use a handful of shavings for this, and that's okay, because these soft curly shavings are lovely. They will burnish it really nicely, but because I roughed it down with my skew, in those shavings are some of these big splinters. And if you start rubbing those on the wood, you're going to end up scratching it and damaging it rather than just burnishing it. Well, there's a good one. Yeah, you don't want to be rubbing that on the wood. So by using my red pad, it gets the same effect, but I know what I'm rubbing against the wood, so to speak. That's what she said. So let's have a little look at that. So that's turned, that's sanded. And we'll just sand those top corners as well. And that is our table leg turned using all of the techniques that I've shown in the previous videos. So I'm now going to set up my duplicating fingers, and I'll tell you all about those. These are my duplicating fingers, and I use these in production rather than setting up calipers for every single measurement along a spindle. I will set up a series of fingers on my jig at the back of the lathe, and this allows me to speed up the process no end. These I sell through my website just as the finger, either individually or in sets of 5 and 10, and they're available for delivery all around the world if you're interested. But I thought I'd just share how I set them up and how they work in this part of the video. So you need a pair of kind of brackets or fixtures here, and a bar. This is steel rod, 19 mil or 3/4 of an inch in diameter. And you can see that the finger just slots onto the rod like that. But importantly, the cap screw at the back pinches down. So this actually pinches the rod rather than a screw actually biting into the rod, which would damage the rod and stop it from working properly. The bracket itself has a slot in the base, and this bolt goes through to a wooden block, and the wooden block's designed so that it will drop through the bed bars, and then when you rotate it, it locks into place beneath the bar with this little knob on there. And that slot gives you a range of movement depending on the size of the work that you're dealing with. On the vertical, the bar wants to be at or just above center, and you can see I've got a hole drilled through here and a saw kerf cut. And then these are bolted in, and the bolts go through into some inserts which are epoxied into the base. The saw kerf cut gives a certain amount of pinch, so I can lock this onto the bar so it's nice and rigid and stays put. At the same time, this can be positioned anywhere along the bar, so depending on the size of the work that I'm dealing with, this can be inside the tailstock, outside the tailstock, or wherever is most convenient along the bar. You can see I've got these fingers set up. I've done the blocking out part of the turning, and the fingers are each set to a point where I would normally measure with my calipers. I've still got to do this end one, so I'll show you how I set that now. The fingers have a nice rounded end, so they can rub on there without it marking at all, and they slide fairly freely along the bar as well. So I need to set that up so that it's just in a position where it will just rub against the diameter that I've turned there. There's no measuring scale on them, so you need to set them up against a bit of wood that you've turned. But at that point there where it will just contact but will drop past, I just lock that down with an Allen key on the set screw, and that's now set. The main thing to remember is before you put your new piece of wood on, you need to lift the fingers up. As you've turned it down into a cylinder, you can drop the fingers down, and they just sit and kind of jingle on the wood until you've turned it down to the diameter. And once you get to the size that you've set them to, they just drop through like that, which makes for a much faster turning experience compared to using calipers. So I've set up now to do this pretty much as it would be in production. Only changes, obviously I've got my fingers set up. I'm going to use my roughing gouge for the initial stage because that's how I would do it in production, but otherwise it's just going to be my signature beading and parting tool as usual. Hopefully from this angle, it's a slightly different angle, but you should be able to see me work, but also see how the fingers go as well. So let's fire up the lathe and we'll have a little go at this. So just like before, it's going to start off cutting the shoulder. Roughing gouge comes in. Just change my grip so that I can feel when it goes to a cylinder. Storyboard comes in. Drop the fingers down, and then I just work through taking all the cuts I need, peeling cuts until the finger drops. Same here and here. Blocking out stage already done, and then we can work through a series of V cuts. I'm going to roll that bead there, this bead here. Take slightly more aggressive cuts in production than I do in a demo, but otherwise it's pretty much the same processes. So we can roll this one. Take that corner off. Just mark the position of that little fillet down there. Just do that by eye. That was quite an aggressive cut, but as we get closer to the final shape, the cut can get lighter. You're always going to get a better finish from a lighter cut. You can see those shavings. When you're getting curly shavings like that, they're much more conducive to a clean surface. Just tidy up here. And that shape just needs a little bit of refinement. Otherwise, I think we're good at that, so we can give that a sand. Sanding from the rear of the work, as before. Pine doesn't need the lathe slowing down. Some timbers, some hardwoods, some exotics, you'd need to slow the lathe down a little bit for sanding. Pine really doesn't care, it's not really an issue at all. But I'm only doing one grit, so it's not going to get too hot anyway. You want a good abrasive that you can sort of fold up and roll up and get around all those shapes that you've turned. It's looking quite good. red abrasive pad. Goes into all those shapes there. And then we can stop that and have a little look compared to, let's grab this leg over here. Excuse me, there we go. Just grab that, compare that to one of the originals, and you can see we've got a pretty good match there. That works quite well. So I hope you've enjoyed that video. I hope it's nice to be able to see how I've been able to pull the techniques that we've shared throughout the series into a finished project. And in the next video, we're going to look at catches in a bit more detail. But until then, I'll see you next time.